following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana Kersner, and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health, using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. This week, we're talking about why you suck at arguing. Yes, provocative title. Now that I've got your attention, you probably do suck at arguing, because most people suck at arguing. No sane person likes arguing. It sucks. I'm saying suck a lot, I know, but arguing sucks. The thing is, everyone argues sometimes. Being conflict averse makes arguments worse because more piles up and you're more keyed up when you finally have the argument. Conflict aversion might be one reason why you suck at arguing, but there are many more reasons. No guest tonight. This is a show compiled from mistakes I've seen people make, and I've made myself, that have hurt feelings, shattered trust, and wrecked relationships. If trust was ever there to begin with. A trust issue, I hate that term, is a big way that a lot of people suck at arguing. If you're arguing from a place of distrust, it's gonna go bad, and it's gonna go bad big, because you can't effectively argue with someone you don't trust. Now, you might, listening, think it's ridiculous to trust someone you're arguing with, but do your arguments tend to go well? Or do you feel like you're fighting for your life, even when you're just fighting over the dishes or who left their shoes somewhere? Even with strangers, people show bizarre markers of distrust in conflict that make zero sense to me, even to the point that they sometimes create conflict that wasn't previously there. I see terms borrowed from political discourse like disingenuous and bad faith. Okay, academia as well as political discourse, but disingenuous, bad faith. You see these words thrown around, at least I do, and it always makes me think, why are you bothering to argue with that person if you really believe that they're talking to you in a way that's disingenuous and bad faith? That seems like the time to walk away to me or hit that block button. This is mind reading negative intentions. And when we mind read negative intentions or assume someone close to us is out to trap us or trip us up, and then we communicate these suspicions to that person, intentionally or not, we're letting them know we don't trust them. Oh, but that's not true, you argue. What other function could these suspicious statements possibly serve? If you're looking for reassurance, ask for what you want instead of suggesting the other person is doing something nefarious. I don't care if this is normal for you. Think about the structure of what you're doing. These moments of lashing out in distrust lead to a form of what the Gottman Institute on Relationships calls one of the 4 horsemen of relationship apocalypses. 4 behaviors that research shows can predict whether a relationship, especially a marriage, will fail. This first horseman is criticism, or more specifically, ad hominem attacks. The Gottman Institute calls it criticism, and that's one of those words that trip people up because, like, well, everybody has to handle criticism. People are very defensive of their right to dish out criticism. When it comes to taking criticism, very different thing. Now, the Gottman Institute separates a critique or a complaint from criticism. In that criticism is, like I said, an ad hominem attack. You're attacking the core of someone's character. It's not something they did. It's something they are. So you're annoying instead of I'm annoyed. You always do this instead of it bothered me when you did this. You're so selfish instead of I was hurt by the apparent lack of consideration. Now, this is something we all slip up on when we get overwhelmed. So don't worry that doing this once means your relationship is doomed. It doesn't mean that. No. What it means is that watching the generalizations, especially always or never statements, that helps a lot. And try to keep the argument focused on the present. I know this is one of these things that it drives me nuts on both sides of the counseling aisle, because sometimes it's not about the present. Sometimes it's about a pattern of behavior. Sometimes you're still hurt from something in the past, and that's valid. Just keep it in the present when you can, which is easier said than done if you have a track record of sucking at arguing, because again, those hurt feelings have piled up. This whole keep it in the present, it's better to do it, focus on your behavior first, set the example, and then point out when the other person is not staying in the present. I find that one of the big issues in talking about conflict and talking about arguing is that people take really good advice and use it to throw at the person they're arguing with instead of taking it themselves, which makes you suck at arguing. More on that in a bit. Going easy on the criticism means that things can get processed as they come instead of piling up. Now, in a lot of cases, it's not that you don't trust the specific person you're arguing with, or you don't realize you don't trust the person you're arguing with. It's that you don't trust anybody the minute there's conflict, the minute there's an argument. You were raised to believe that arguments are knockdown, drag-out, zero-sum events where someone won and someone was humiliated. And in these families, the person who was humiliated was the first person who admitted they did anything wrong. But in healthy relationships and healthy conflict, where you see you made a mistake isn't losing. In fact, if you have trouble admitting mistakes, you might lose the relationship. Admitting a mistake is not abdicating all boundaries, no matter what your very argumentative family said or did. Top 10 phrase: other people don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. You have the right to set limits on what someone calls you, what words someone uses to describe your behavior, and how intense the argument gets. So help me, do not use this as a control lever to shut down all complaints people have with you, right? It's about fairness. Admitting when you're less than perfect is better than getting defensive, another of the Gottman Institute's horsemen of relationships. Defensiveness leads to DARVO, which stands, you may have heard this in domestic violence circles. DARVO stands for deny and reverse victim and offender. Whenever you insist someone made you do something hurtful, you had to, you are DARVOing. You are responsible for your behavior. Your feelings are valid, but you're responsible for your behavior. Top 10 phrase: don't let problems that aren't your fault lead to mistakes that are. That's where this top 10 phrase comes from. Reacting to someone saying you hurt them with, well, you hurt me first. Well, that's uncaring and it's manipulative. Two wrongs don't make a right. We all get defensive sometimes. That's why this Gottman Institute model freaks a lot of people out and makes things seem very scary and doomed to fail, which is why I'm going through it with alternative language. What wrecks relationships is when you're so defensive that you start deflecting and projecting blame with a certain amount of regularity. Deflection and projection, what leads to DARVO, occur when an emotional state is so unbearable that the person feels the need to get it away from them, fling it off of them, and onto whoever they're with at that point. If you suck at arguing, you probably deflect and project and defend these behaviors, claiming you're expressing how you feel. That is not expressing how you feel. And we'll get to why after our first break. Questions, comments, concerns, Liana at nottherapyshow.com, or go to my website if you can't remember how to spell my name, nottherapyshow.com. Fill out the contact form there, join your mailing list, or Not Therapy Show at Not Therapy Show on X. That's Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. I've been better at the Threads lately. Yay. Back after this with more Why You Suck at Arguing on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist, and we're still talking why you suck at arguing. Before the break, I brought up passing off deflections and projections of negative states through misuse of I feel statements as a way a lot of people suck at arguing. And this is something I feel very, very strongly about. So, questions, comments, concerns, any feedback at all, Liana at nottherapyshow.com, or just go to the website, nottherapyshow.com, fill out the contact form, join the mailing list while you're there, or at Not Therapy Show on X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Now, the part of the reason I feel so strongly about misuse of I feel statements is misuse of I feel statements hurt my brain on such a unique and piercing level. I'm an extremely intense listener. Listen twice before you talk once is a top 10 phrase for a reason. I've been taught to pay close attention to elements of speech. So when someone says, I feel, I'm expecting a feeling. So when someone says, I feel, and then they say something that is not actually a feeling, it's like there's a record scratch in my brain. Okay, I'm ready for the feeling thing that I'm ready to validate, and then, wah, 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 right? Misuse of I feel statements is a verbal tic that's come out of the social weaponization of therapeutic language, and it makes me nuts. Like I said, it's based on the concept that feelings are always valid. Because feelings are always valid, too many people tack I feel onto the beginning of sentences where it doesn't apply. Other people have picked up the speech pattern from someone who is weaponizing I feel statements, so they don't even realize what they're doing. This is just how people talk. No, here's the problem with it, okay? If someone says, I feel ignored, okay, it doesn't feel good to feel ignored. I can validate that. Like, I know what that's like. Yeah, it sucks to feel ignored. I don't want you to feel that way, right? But I feel that you are ignoring me is an accusation disguised as an I feel statement. And it's often a trap. Because, of course, somebody says, I feel, right? The expectation is you're supposed to validate my feelings now. Unfortunately, you can't validate I feel that you're ignoring me without confirming that you are in fact ignoring the person. So, if you say, I'm not ignoring you, refuting the facts and the accusation, well, that's defensiveness and it's therefore quote unquote wrong. But I'm sorry that you feel that I'm ignoring you is apologizing for the other person's feelings. So it's a non-apology apology. So if the person wasn't actually intentionally ignoring you, I feel that you are ignoring me is putting the other person in a no-win situation. They cannot authentically and supportively respond to that kind of comment. That's why it drives me crazy. It adds another conflict onto the pile of conflicts instead of resolving the conflict. And so things get worse instead of better. Frustration increases, hurt feelings increase, the sense of hopelessness increases. Stop misusing I feel statements. My God. I feel ignored, or I felt ignored when you didn't call me back, can be responded to with, for instance, okay, it doesn't feel good to feel ignored. I didn't want that. I didn't call you back because my battery died on my phone or something like that, right? It's keeping it neutral so no one feels falsely accused, no one feels put on the spot. I felt this when you did that is not the same as I feel that you did this. Especially, and this is when things get really real, and if you do this, sorry, you suck at arguing. When someone doesn't agree that they actually were ignoring you, you follow up with, criticism like, I said how I feel. You're supposed to validate my feelings. That's not going to go well. Again, we all mess up on this sometimes. A couple times, no problem. If you do it and then you catch yourself and rephrase, that's great. That's about the best we can ask of ourselves. That correction makes the other person see that you're trying. And that's the important thing. Making the effort, right? Making the effort to take responsibility for your own emotional regulation, not let problems that aren't your fault leading to mistakes that are, avoiding getting so frustrated, panicking, guilty, that you decide it's hopeless and you just stop putting in the work. That is what makes you better at arguing. Don't give up. Don't hit the point, well, nothing I do or say is going to make any difference. If that's where you're at emotionally and mentally, if that's the story you're telling yourself, you're not going to be able to work anything out because it's hopeless. It won't do any good. It's a form of something called catastrophizing. And catastrophizing is a cognitive distortion. Yeah. It's an exaggerated or irrational thought pattern. That's what a cognitive distortion is, an exaggerated or irrational thought pattern. Now, people like me with PTS, when PTS becomes the D, we're prone to catastrophizing because we've got past experience when the worst did happen, when the system failed. So our sense of how likely another similar terrible thing is to happen, that's heightened. Now, teenagers catastrophize a lot because every emotional state feels like it's going to be forever. And there's a lot of adults who regress to a teenage mindset or even the emotional maturity of a child when there is conflict because of past trauma. It's your responsibility to deal with this past trauma so it doesn't continue to dog you in the present. Because catastrophizing gets in the way of resolving conflicts. A tendency to catastrophize can also indicate weak personal boundaries. I'd go so far to say they are a sign there is some sort of weak personal boundary here. Again, people don't have to like your boundaries. They do have to respect them. Catastrophizing, this is the loop, also makes it difficult to set boundaries in the first place, right? It's hard to set boundaries when you think they won't do any good. It's hard to set boundaries when you think nobody is going to listen to you. It's hard to set boundaries with someone you are afraid is going to throw you out on the street and leave you homeless. This is where we get into people going, well, that's not catastrophizing. That's happened, or I've been threatened with that. And this is the issue. Whether something's a reasonable fear or catastrophizing is somewhat subjective. In abusive relationships, that instability, that's the worst that could happen. That's not a cognitive distortion. That's reality. Now, actual catastrophizing, the actual cognitive distortion, right? Not, no, this has been threatened or this has happened before. Catastrophizing increases defensiveness and the likelihood you're going to do a preemptive attack to protect yourself. And that preemptive attack is that ad hominem criticism, attacking the person's core character that we talked about off the top. The more you speculate on the horrible things that could happen, the less you're paying attention to what's actually happening in the present which makes that bad future outcome more likely. So if you catch yourself catastrophizing, slow down, take a few breaths, ask for clarification, start summarizing what you understand the person has told you before you continue to make sure you understand. And if you need it, ask for a break. It really helps to give the other person a sense of how long the break is going to be. Standard recommendation is 20 minutes. That's the amount of time it takes, the system to regulate again, come down from that panic. But if you only need 10, no problem. If you need more like 30, okay. But just say, look, I need 20 minutes. I need 30 minutes. I just need to calm down because I don't trust what I'm going to say right now. When you put it that way, the other person usually understands. If they don't, something's very wrong. Taking a break's important because if you don't take breaks when you need it, again, you are responsible for asking for these things, for saying, I need this in the moment. You can't expect the person to know when you need this and suggest it. Because by the time early on you realize you need it, you've already started to either blow up or shut down. And that shutdown comes across as the dreaded stonewalling. Yes, stonewalling. Dun, dun, dun. We'll deal with that after the break. Liana at nottherapyshow.com if you've got questions, comments, concerns, any feedback on the show at all. Or nottherapyshow.com, easy to remember. Just fill out the contact form, join the mailing list while you're there. Or at Not Therapy on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. We'll be right back. I won't stonewall you. Ha, ha, ha. Not a good segue. Okay, see you soon on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back and It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're still talking about why you may suck at arguing. And before the last break, I was teasing a discussion of stonewalling. That was ironic. Yeah, stonewalling, though. I'm leading up to it because, some people have to get ready for this one. This is a tender point. It's a big one in terms of the impact on relationships, but it's also something that is poorly understood. So just bear with me here. I'm not attacking you. I promise. Stonewalling gets its name from the metaphor of building a wall between you and the person you're fighting with. So it's, a shutdown, a closing off, tuning out, turning away. Somebody might start fussing with something, muttering to themselves. Yeah. Anybody who's watched somebody check out this way knows the drill. You stop getting responses. It's incredibly frustrating and hurtful, and it makes you feel, rejected. Now, if you're somebody that gets stonewalled, it can feel like one of those deliberate manipulations. However, that's not always true. More often, I'd even say usually, it's a response to psychological overwhelm. It is the symptoms of somebody just not being able to handle it anymore. And again, everyone gets overwhelmed sometimes. It's human. The problem is when, instead of learning how to recognize, minimize, head off the overwhelm, catching yourself doing it and going, wait, no, I'm doing that avoidant behavior again. I need to do better. The stonewalling becomes a habit because somebody's spacing out or suddenly acting like the other person isn't there it can be kind of creepy, right? Asking for a break is always better than stonewalling. Always. And you notice how I describe stonewalling is more, fuss. Yeah, Men stonewall typically, and women stonewall typically in very different ways. And the male stonewalling of just grumbling silent, that's the one that is sort of pop culture been demonized, but it's all the same thing. Both versions drive everyone crazy. Know that, ha ha ha, I'm gonna just putter around. No, it's not cute. You're stonewalling. You got to learn to stop, or it will damage your relationships. Now, that asking for the break thing instead of stonewalling. We talked about this before the break, ironically, but there are reasons some people are afraid or uncomfortable asking for those breaks. And I relate to that. I sympathize with that. Breaks are still better than getting overwhelmed. If you're not going to shut down from overwhelm, you're probably going to blow up from overwhelm. And that's not good either. But one thing I find very interesting about the Gottman Institute for Horsemen is that what's not there. Yelling is not a predictor of divorce. What is a predictor of divorce? The fourth horseman, so stonewalling was the third. The fourth horseman is contempt. And I know that being treated with contempt historically is why I find asking for a break in an argument highly, highly uncomfortable. I have been mocked and treated as weak when I said, I need a break. You may have been, you don't care about me. Get back here and fight. That's where the be a man, stop running away gets flung at some people. That's contempt. Okay. And the Gottman Institute says that contempt is, the most predictive behavior regarding the end of a relationship. It is the worst thing you can do. And that makes sense because what's contempt, right? It's some sort of communication that the other person is beneath you. So it's stuff like sarcasm. What sarcasm's funny? Not when you're on the receiving end of it, right? Condescension. Nobody likes condescension, but mockery, meaning cruel jokes, just joking. It's not just a joke if the other person's hurt, right? Name calling, obviously. Body language, and body language is one of these tricky things that different things mean things to different people, but like eye rolling, arm crossing, head rolling, sneering, this stuff, it's nonverbal. And a crossed arm can indicate feeling defensive. It can also look like, what somebody's parent did while they were disciplining them. So that is gonna send the sign that you're acting like their parent instead of their partner. Keep that in mind, right? Because these things, if somebody feels like you are putting yourself in a superior position to them, even disgusting them, that poisons a relationship. That takes a lot of work to detoxify. And yet, we as a culture don't focus on that contempt. We make sarcasm and mockery. I mean, that's the freaking Big Bang Theory, isn't it, right? Oh, Sheldon's so funny. No, the focus on yelling in our society, don't yell at me, misses the real issue. The issue is not how loud someone's voice is. People who come from, a lot of different cultures, including cultures I come from, there's like friendly yelling, right? Some people just come from loud families. That's not the issue. The issue is the contempt. Acting like you're superior to someone close to you is a great way to ruin closeness. I can hear the next question. Don't worry, I'm getting to it. What if I don't mean to? What if somebody says I'm doing that, but you're not? Well, this is a bit of a catch-22, right? Because if someone says they say I'm doing that, but I'm not. Well, do you think you know better than them? Listen to them, for crying out loud. If you don't know how to respond to something, the best thing to do is ask with as few theatrics as possible, please. Contempt is a nasty one because, again, it's taught in those highly critical families. Someone's critical, you respond with contempt because you're feeling defensive, and then you end up just either one-upping each other or someone else starts stonewalling. You see how the four horsemen work together. Thinking you know more than the other person does. That false certainty, that will wreck relationship. When someone says, well, this is my experience, and you're saying, no, you're wrong. You're just wrong. You say you do that, but I'm not doing that. How do you solve that problem? You can't. It's the unstoppable force and it's the immovable object, but I see it so often. But there's always a but. This is a complicated subject. Some people act contemptuous because they're anticipating or fearing other people treating them with contempt, right? Right. This is why contempt is such an impediment to solving problems. It hurts so badly. Criticism, contempt, dismissiveness. It hurts so badly that we preemptively tried to head it off with criticism, contempt of our own. We don't even realize we're doing it. We're so reactive. It is a really vicious cycle. So if you don't like how being treated with contempt feels, work hard not to do it to other people, right? Don't let problems that aren't your fault lead to mistakes that are. Okay, I've thrown a lot at you. So let's recap. The reasons you might suck at arguing. I would kill for reverb right now. The reasons you might suck at arguing, right? Okay. Include, you can't trust. Make that seem real glamorous in the media, but no, it's not. Can't trust, bad. You criticize, ad hominem. You don't set effective boundaries. You get defensive and Darvo, deny and reverse victim and offender. You misuse I feel statements. Big one for me. You catastrophize. You stonewall instead of asking for breaks. And you treat people with contempt. I guarantee you do one of those things on this list. I do one of those things, right? I already admitted I suck at asking for breaks. It's something I have to be aware of. I am prone to catastrophizing, right? I am aware of where I am challenged. And anybody in the mental health field has to be extremely careful because people have this, they know more about this stuff than I do. And so they can project the idea that you think you're better than them because they feel insecure about the imbalance of knowledge and training there. And that can be very, very difficult for the relationships of therapists because it's you think you're better than me. It is a real challenge and it's real for both people. So good news, we all suck at arguing. Yay, we suck. Yay. And the good news, we can all improve. It's within our control. That's good, right? We're not doomed. And there's one more element that I haven't discussed this show. Making up after a fight. A lot of people suck lemons at that. I didn't want to say lemons. I drew out the suck because I didn't know what the next word was going to come out of my mouth. Lemons! Didn't want to say lemons. Stay tuned to Suck Less at Making Up. Questions, comments, any feedback whatsoever. Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is the website if you can't spell my name right. Join the mailing list while you're there, or social media at Not Therapy Show on X. That's Twitter, Instagram, where I'm more active on that account, and Threads that I'm getting better at. When we come back after our final break, making up without screwing it up. We could probably do a whole episode on this, but we're going to start here on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back and It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're still talking You Suck at Arguing. That's so fun, and I don't know why. I guess because we're just rolling around in the fact that we're all bad at this. And as I promised, final segment, we're going to talk about making up. That thing a lot of people don't do. Others think makeup sex will fix everything. It might be fun and intense. It won't fix everything. And making up is a very important part of being good at arguing. It's the if you break it, you bought it concept. But that's glib. Gotta watch the sarcasm, right? Don't sound contemptuous. This is tender. The core of making up is communicating that the other person is more important to you than the fight. That is it. That is the core concept. That's what heals the wound. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Obviously, if the fight's less nasty to begin with, you'll have, a shorter wall to climb to reach. You are more important than this fight. And I didn't mean to use the metaphor of wall. I meant hill. This is why you shouldn't ad-lib these things. Okay. Either way, understanding that the more you diggy hole, the more you have to climby out. And it's way harder to climb out than dig the hole. That's good motivation to suck less and referencing the earworm that is the song Diggy Hole. This climbing out of the hole you dug can take some time. And there is a headspace to this. If you're... It's hard when both people are hurt because you have that very defensive, remember, horseman of relationships, defensiveness. You have the, well, I'm hurt too. Why does it have to be me? Right? That's what makes it so hard. You have to be prepared to be vulnerable and to keep trying. A lot of people, since they didn't expect the thing that hurt them to come flying at them, they're not necessarily going to know what's going to make them feel important to you again. It might take some trial and error. And, if you get too frustrated with that process, you may put more things into the conversation that make the other person feel like they don't really matter to you. The fight is what matters, and then you have to start over. Yeah, this is tough because there's no shortcuts here. And like I said, it takes both people participating for this to work. It can't be one-sided. It's about not having any serious lingering hurts that might not heal right? And it's gotta be something both people are only mildly uncomfortable with. If someone feels coerced or forced to do something, that's gonna create problems. That's not gonna solve it, So what are some examples, right? Some people need to be held. Some people do. Touch is really central for a lot of people. I find touch is very central to a lot of men who aren't good with feeling vulnerable, and so they don't know how to ask for touch. They end up demanding it because they're so keyed up. No one's fault. Society sucks at this stuff regarding men. Some people need to hear the good things. They need to get a refresher on what you love about them, especially if you've said some awful stuff, right? Try not to say awful stuff in the first place. It's going to take a lot more effort to heal that. You're going to have to say a lot more good things to overcome the bad things, because a lot of people's brains have a negativity bias. That's what keeps us alive. There are other things, right? It's that whole love language, quality time, acts of service, all that stuff, yada, 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 right? We don't have to go over that if you know it. If you don't, that's not going to be helpful here. The first step to making up, to finding these common solutions, is actually expressing that you care that the other person got hurt. And that's a step a lot of people miss or even avoid because it's obvious, or like I said before, well, I'm hurt too. And we are back to trust. If you're waiting for the other person to express caring first, because something inside you doesn't trust you'll get it at all if you take the first step, there's a problem there. If you can't be the first person to go, you know what, I'm going to care instead of criticize. I'm going to humble instead of act bigger. The problem might be in the relationship. Yeah. It might also be with one of the people involved. Like, it might be internal. And if that person is you, that's something you do have to work on. Don't wait. The longer you wait, the worse it will be. If it's the other person, they will not change for you, no matter how much they love you. This is a hard thing to accept. Because it's not about you. It likely predated you. You didn't cause it. You can't cure it. And it's not going to get better unless they really want to work on themselves. And this will be hard to hear, because this is already hard to hear. Most people don't really want to work on themselves. They're caught in that prison of defensiveness. They want someone to tell them it's not their fault, so they don't really have to put in more effort. If your partner or friend can't connect to the fact that they care about you, even when they're angry at you, if they're a fight to the death type, you have to decide whether you can live with that, potentially for decades, potentially forever, or whether you have to end the relationship for your own sake. Because these fights to the death, especially if you can't respond in kind, will drain you sooner or later. These are very challenging people to care about because the amount of caring you show will never be enough. Even if you are a saint in, the face of them acting like Satan, it will never be enough. They'll focus on the one thing you didn't do or the one thing they think you came up short on. They will focus on that instead of everything you did do. Because they grew up in an environment where the 4 horsemen of relationships were running all over the place, right? The criticism ad hominem, the contempt, the defensiveness, the stonewalling. I remember them all. Oh my God, I blanked for a minute. That was normal. And changing that can be an ongoing challenge. And again, it has to come from within them. There's a hole inside them left from the 4 horsemen's hooves that you can't fill. What you can do is end up getting blamed. You're there, so you're the reason. You're there to emotionally kick. You're a convenient source of deflection. But if you're holding a grudge, if it's actually not the other person, if you're just deflecting and projecting onto the other person because you're holding a grudge, what's wrong with you? Literal question. You're creating long-term damage to a relationship over a temporary problem, which is why I've been saying all show, top 10 phrase, don't let problems that aren't your fault lead to mistakes that are. Is this fight really that big a deal? Or is this your ego talking? Sometimes it is that big a deal. If someone has violated your trust in some way, you cannot force forgiveness. And too many therapists and counselors try to coerce or guilt someone into pretending to forgive because otherwise the relationship is doomed. You have to. Hard truth, if that's the only way to save the relationship, then you can't save it. Because forced forgiveness isn't forgiveness. It's re-traumatizing. I'll talk more about this in later weeks, but it's sending the message to the person being coerced that their feelings don't matter. The other person is the only important thing, which feeds into that contempt state. Forgiveness is not a goal you can get to directly. Forgiveness is a result of doing other healing work. And you are never required to forgive someone, no matter what those nosy relatives, friends, or counselor your friend recommended says. Now, granted, if you want the relationship to go back to being good, though, you do have to put in the work. Real work. It shouldn't make you miserable. But you have to be prepared to hear hard things without stonewalling, exploding, starting to beg, or running away. And yeah, I just went through the freeze, fight, fawn, or flight checklist because in a healthy relationship, both parties support each other in preventing one or both people from getting to one of those panic states. So again, to recap, minimize the lows, maximize the highs. Focus on the positive because the negative came from the conflict. That is how you make up, and it will take some trial and error. Don't just hide hurt. Don't try to just let it go. Don't agree to never speak about it again, because in a loving relationship, you don't have to hide your feelings. And in a relationship with the clock on a radio show, we do have to wrap. Now, there will be more on this in the coming weeks. Don't worry, I won't leave you hanging. NotTherapyShow.com, questions, comments, concerns. Otherwise, I've been saying things drive me crazy all this show. I don't mean things driving me good crazy. I mean things driving me bad crazy because, it's coming. Your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. See you next week.